I hadn't been back to Toledo in over a year, but the smell hit me the moment I stepped off the plane. Wet asphalt gasoline, and whatever industrial sadness floats in from the river. I wasn't here for nostalgia. I was here for my father's 67th birthday, a milestone celebration he and his new wife were throwing at the Old Country Club off Route 75. I hadn't been invited, not officially, but I was the one who paid for it. See, 3 months earlier, my dad Ray called me sounding more upbeat than he had in years. It's just a little get-together, he'd said, his voice warm, nostalgic. Family, friends, maybe a toast or two. I want you to be part of it, son. Part of it. That was the phrase he used. Not come celebrate, not we can't wait to see you, just part of it. I should have caught the wording, but when your dad, the man who raised you alone after your mom walked out, calls you sounding like he did when he used to pack PB&Js for your field trips, you don't overthink the semantics. I was 8 when Mom left, just packed her things one night and said she needed air. Ray, he never said much about it, just that sometimes people leave, it's not about you. He worked at a steel plant for 27 years, put in night shifts so I could go to summer camp, missed only one baseball game, and that was the day I cracked my collarbone and ended up in the ER. The man was reliable, steady. Until he wasn't. The shift started sometime after he married Lorraine. She was all yoga pants and diffusers and those weird zero-calorie wellness waters that promise clarity and deliver indigestion. Lorraine made Ray feel young again. He told me that over brunch once, which was weird considering Ray used to think brunch was for people with no real jobs. I met her 2 years ago when I flew in for Thanksgiving. She greeted me at the door with a long hug that smelled like lavender and clove oil, then handed me a gratitude stone and asked me to set my intention before I even got a plate of turkey. I knew we were in trouble when she replaced Dad's lazy boy with a beige velvet chaise and started referring to the living room as the peace space. Still, Ray sounded happy, and after what he gave up for me, happiness seemed like the least I could afford to fund. I started helping out at first with small things, a new alternator when his truck died, co-signing on a loan when their HVAC system blew midwinter. But gradually, the calls got more frequent. Hey, son, you got a minute, was how they always began, and I learned that was code for, we're about to make you feel guilty about something we should be handling ourselves. Over 6 years, I sent more than $200,000 to help Dad stay afloat. Some of it for legit reasons, medical bills, house repairs, but a lot of it, well, I don't think Himalayan salt lamps are medically necessary, and I'm pretty sure Lorraine's trip to Sedona for rebalancing her chakras wasn't covered under Dad's union insurance. I didn't push back. I work in green architecture running projects out of Seattle. The pay's good, the hour's brutal. I figured if I could afford it and it made him comfortable, so be it. He raised me. Maybe this was just the cycle reversing, until the day he called about the birthday party. You remember the Northridge Country Club, he asked? Place with the duck pond and the old oak bar? Of course I remembered. I used to mow their lawn every summer in high school for 10 an hour and a lukewarm Sprite from the groundskeeper. Well, he continued, Lorraine says we should celebrate big this year. 67's just a number, but, we've come a long way. He paused like he wanted me to interrupt to object, but I didn't. So, we're thinking dinner music open bar. Keep it simple, but classy. I offered to help, figuring I'd kick in a few grand. You'd really do that, he asked, sounding almost emotional. You're a good man, Owen. Your mom would have been proud. By the end of the week, I'd wired $14,200 to the event planner, picked the menu, even helped finalize the guest list with Lorraine. Though in retrospect, that list must have changed after I signed off on the deposit. The weird thing, no physical invite ever came. No evite, no group text. But every time I called, Dad was talking about the event like I was going to be there. Uncle Jay's flying in from Detroit. Haven't seen him in years, he'd say. Or, you're gonna love what we did with the playlist Classic Springsteen, just like old times. So, I booked my flight, took 3 unpaid days off work, dropped $2,000 on a tailored suit, because if I was gonna show up after 6 months of near silence, I wanted to look like I belonged. When I landed, I texted Dad, just landed, can't wait to see you tonight. No reply. At the hotel, I checked into a room I paid for myself and tried not to let the silence get under my skin. Maybe he was busy, maybe the AV system was acting up, or Lorraine was throwing a turmeric-related meltdown. By 6:50, I was at the entrance of the country club, adjusting my tie and ignoring the pit in my stomach. The place looked pristine, fairy lights and the Oaks valet staff in pressed uniforms and a string quartet tuning up near the patio. I gave my name at the check-in desk. The woman, clipboard in hand, smiled like she was used to calming down frantic brides and drunk uncles. She flipped pages, then flipped again, and again. "I'm sorry," she said finally. "You're not on the list." My first instinct was to laugh. "I'm the birthday man's son," I said, smiling. "I helped plan this." She blinked. "Let me check with the event coordinator." She walked off. I stood there watching guests stroll by, relatives I hadn't seen since my high school graduation. My cousin Ella gave me a confused wave. Her husband gave me the look you give a guy who clearly forgot his invite at home. Then I saw him, my dad Ray, walking up in a gray linen suit that probably cost more than my mortgage payment. He looked guilty, like a kid caught sneaking cigarettes behind the garage. And trailing behind him was Lorraine in a satin dress and a tight-lipped smile that didn't quite reach her over-plumped cheeks. Ray stopped about 3 feet from me. "Owen," he said, not quite meeting my eyes, "wasn't expecting you." That's when I knew. That's when everything, the months of short texts, the missed calls, the weird silences clicked into place. I wasn't on the list, not by accident. I wasn't supposed to be here. I stood there like an idiot, tie half loosened from the flight sweat prickling beneath the collar of my overpriced suit. "Not expecting me?" I echoed, keeping my tone even, but I could already feel the heat rising in my ears. Ray avoided my gaze, his hands fumbling with the cuff of his jacket, like he wished he could disappear into the country club's white stucco walls. "Lorraine thought," he began, but the words trailed off into nothing. Behind him, Lorraine's expression stayed frozen, but her eyes flicked toward the woman at the clipboard. Damage control mode, her specialty. "You should have called," I said quietly. "I wired you 14 grand. Booked flights, took days off work." I watched his jaw tighten. "I planned this with you." He took a breath like he was trying to find the right tone, the version of himself that used to pat me on the back after games and say, "Good hustle, kid." But the man standing in front of me now, he looked smaller somehow. Not physically, but morally. "We decided to keep it intimate," Lorraine finally chimed in, the word rolling off her tongue like an insult wrapped in silk. "The guest list had to be tight, family only." "I am family," I said, voice low but firm. "I'm your son." Ray winced, and in that split second I saw it. The guilt, the shame, but also something uglier, self-preservation. He wasn't going to back me up. Not here, not now. A staff member nearby asked if I needed help. I shook my head. I wasn't going to cause a scene. Not yet. Not while I was still figuring out how deep this betrayal ran. Instead, I pulled out my phone, opened my banking app, and showed the event deposit. "You want me gone?" I said. "Then refund me. Every cent. Otherwise, I'm going inside." Lorraine paled. Ray opened his mouth, but before he could say anything, someone grabbed my arm. "Owen." It was Aunt Patty, his younger sister, wide-eyed and wearing a sparkly navy blue dress she probably bought for this occasion. "Why are you still out here?" I glanced at Ray, who suddenly looked like a cornered animal. Apparently, I said I wasn't invited. Her jaw dropped. She turned to her brother. "Raymond, is this true?" Her voice was ice. Old-school Midwest mom ice. The kind that could make a grown man apologize for breathing wrong at Thanksgiving. Ray rubbed his temples. "It's complicated. It's not I cut in. I paid for this party, I showed up. And I was told I'm not real family." Aunt Patty looked between the three of us like she was solving a puzzle. "That's nonsense," she snapped. Then to me firmly, "You're coming in with me." I didn't need rescuing, but at that moment I accepted her arm like a lifeline. As we walked through the entrance, I heard Lorraine whisper, "This is going to ruin everything," and Ray barely audible murmuring, "It already has." Inside, the ballroom shimmered with crystal chandeliers, white roses, and linen-covered tables. A jazz trio played in the corner. It looked like a wedding reception for people who'd already been married for decades. Patty marched me straight to table 3 hours, apparently, and made a show of pulling out a chair. "This is where you belong," she said loud enough for nearby relatives to hear. My cousin Benny did a double take. "Owen Man didn't know you were coming." "Neither did they," I said flatly. The ripple effect began immediately. Heads turned. Murmurs spread. Someone at table 5 pulled out their phone and started typing, probably texting someone across the room. I sat down back straight, stomach tight. The room smelled like rosemary chicken and resentment. Patty leaned in. "You want me to cause a scene? 'Cause I will." I smirked. "Not yet. Let them sweat first." I could see Lorraine across the room, fussing over the dessert table, pretending everything was fine. Ray stood by the bar sipping whiskey, like it was the only thing keeping him upright. My brother Mason eventually strolled over, dressed in jeans that probably cost more than my rent. He didn't say hi, just dropped into the seat next to me and muttered, "You really gonna do this tonight?" I turned slowly. Do it exist? He shrugged, grabbed a breadstick. Dad's been stressed. You coming in here like this isn't helping. Funny, I said. You didn't say that when I was paying your phone bill last month. He didn't look at me, just chewed silently, jaw tight. That's when it clicked. This wasn't just about a party. It wasn't even about Lorraine. This was about leverage, control. Somewhere along the way, I became a walking checkbook. And when checkbooks start talking back, people get uncomfortable. Aunt Patty stood and clinked her glass. Let's raise a toast to Ray, she said. But before we get to speeches, I want to thank the person who made all of this possible. She looked directly at me. Owen, your generosity gave us this beautiful evening. The room stilled. Ray visibly flinched. Lorraine froze mid-step. I didn't stand, didn't wave, just gave a tight nod. Happy to support family, I said, even when they forget I'm in it. Mason muttered a curse. Lorraine whispered something sharp to Ray. But the silence had cracked. People were watching now. And I wasn't done. Not even close. People always say silence is powerful, but in that ballroom, it wasn't just silence, it was calculation. The kind where eyes shift across linen-covered tables, mouths pause mid-bite, and everyone starts reevaluating their place in the story they thought they were part of. I didn't plan to hijack the night. I really didn't. But something about hearing my aunts toast that single moment of recognition flipped a switch in me. Not rage, not even sadness anymore, just clarity. I scanned the room, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like a visitor to my own family. I felt like a witness. Patty sat back down with a satisfied little smile on her face, like she'd just played the opening move in a long chess match. Ray didn't even raise his glass. His hands were on his lap, fingers knotted, avoiding eye contact with anyone. Lorraine looked like she'd swallowed a lemon, eyes darting around, probably wondering if it was too late to call the valet. Mason was scrolling through his phone now, pretending the world outside this party was more interesting than the one he'd been quietly bleeding dry for years. But the most surprising thing, people started gravitating toward me. It began with my cousin Trish. She leaned over from another table, smiling hesitantly. Hey, I didn't realize you were back in town. This party's amazing. I gave her a half smile. Glad someone thinks so. She tilted her head. Wait, did you really pay for all this? Her voice was low, cautious. I nodded, and her eyes widened. Wow. That's a lot. I mean, Ray always said work was going great, but her voice trailed off, the puzzle pieces falling into place. Then her fiancé piped up, your dad told us the company gave him a retirement bonus to throw this bash. A beat of silence. Sure they did, I said dryly, right after they sent him a unicorn and a check for emotional growth. Trish laughed, a real one this time, but it was laced with something heavier. Embarrassment, recognition, truth. Words spread quickly. I could feel it. Not in an overt way, nobody was shouting, nobody flipped over a table, but in the shifting tone of conversations. The glances my way, the way people started leaning away from Lorraine's orbit and into mine. Even Uncle Pete, who I swear once told me I was too uptight to be fun, clapped a hand on my shoulder and muttered, hell of a toast, kid. You got guts. I nodded, taking it in. I didn't need validation. I just needed acknowledgement that I wasn't crazy. That I hadn't imagined the emotional ATM role I'd been slotted into over the years. That anyone had noticed the imbalance. Meanwhile, Lorraine was unraveling. I saw her whispering to the event coordinator, who kept glancing at me like I was holding a Molotov cocktail instead of a wine glass. She pulled Ray aside near the dessert table, her manicured hand gripping his elbow hard enough to make him wince. I couldn't hear what she was saying, but I didn't need to. Her lips were tight, her eyes wide. Her panic a glowing neon sign that screamed control slipping. And then it happened. The DJ, bless his confused little heart, announced it was time for the cake and a few more speeches. I watched Lorraine step forward like she was about to reclaim her kingdom. She tapped to the mic, a smile too big. Thank you all for coming to celebrate this incredible man, my husband Ray. She paused for polite applause. He's worked so hard and we wanted to show him how much he's appreciated. Thank you to everyone who helped make this evening special. Her eyes flicked to me just long enough to register, especially those who contributed behind the scenes. That was her version of a bandage over a bullet wound. Then she launched into a glowing tribute to Ray, full of recycled Facebook captions and Pinterest-level sentimentality. He's the rock of this family, she said. The foundation. The man who shows up even when no one's watching. I snorted, loud enough that several heads turned. Patty kicked me lightly under the table, warning me to keep my powder dry. But I didn't move. I let Lorraine finish her speech and hand the mic off to Mason, who looked as thrilled as a teenager being asked to do karaoke at church. He mumbled something generic about Dad teaching him about grit and commitment, which was rich coming from someone whose idea of a hard day was when the Wi-Fi lagged during his Twitch stream. When he finally sat down, the mic was placed back on the stand. There was a moment of quiet. Then Patty stood again. "One more," she said, and looked straight at me. All eyes turned, and this time I didn't hesitate. As I walked to the mic, I didn't feel nervous. I didn't feel like the outsider, the provider, the forgotten son. I felt rooted. Not in spite of the dysfunction around me, but because of it. This was my clarity. I looked out over the room, my family, my history, my audience. "Hi," I began. I wasn't planning on speaking again, but I've been thinking about family. I paused. You know what they say, family is supposed to be your safety net. The people who catch you when the world drops you. But sometimes you realize you've become the net for everyone else. And somewhere along the way, they forgot you're made of thread too. A hush settled. No jazz trio, no clinking glasses, just silence. I've been supporting my father financially for 6 years. Quietly, willingly, because I love him, because I believed in him, and because I wanted to honor everything he did for me growing up. I held up my phone, but that support slowly became expectation, and that expectation became entitlement, until the point where I wasn't even considered worthy of attending the party I paid for. There were audible gasps. One older relative actually mouthed, "Jesus." "I'm not saying this for sympathy," I continued. "I'm saying it because I think we all deserve to know the truth behind the curtain. This night, this celebration, it didn't come from a company bonus or a miracle windfall. It came from me. And not because I wanted applause. I wanted connection. I wanted family. But money doesn't buy love. It just rents loyalty, and that lease ran out tonight." A few people clapped. Just a few, but it was enough. I stepped down from the mic, pulse steady. I hadn't torched the room. I'd just turned on the lights. I returned to my seat. Patty squeezed my hand under the table. Mason wouldn't look at me. Ray looked gutted. Lorraine? She was gone. I scanned the room. No sight of her. That's when I noticed my phone vibrating in my pocket. A text from an unknown number. "Hope you enjoyed your little speech. You have no idea what you've started." I stared at the screen, and just like that, the party wasn't over. I stared at the message on my phone, the glow of the screen sharp against the ballroom's soft lighting. "Hope you enjoyed your little speech. You have no idea what you've started." No name, no emojis, just a warning dressed as a threat. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. My first instinct was to screenshot it, send it to someone, Patty maybe, but I knew better. This wasn't about public sympathy anymore. This was personal. And whoever sent it wasn't just angry I'd bruised something deeper. Ego pride. Maybe a lie that had lived too comfortably for too long. I slipped the phone into my pocket and looked around. Lorraine was still missing. Ray had sat down again, shoulders hunched, like he was physically shrinking from the evening. Mason had vanished too. That in itself wasn't strange. He was the kind of guy who ghosted dinner halfway through just to take a call, which usually meant scrolling Instagram alone on a bench. But this time it felt calculated, like someone had pulled a string backstage and left me on the stage lights. Patty leaned over. "Everything okay?" Her voice was low, but alert. I shook my head, once not trusting myself to speak just yet. She didn't push. She just reached for the wine bottle and refilled both our glasses like we were about to settle in for something bigger than dessert. Then, like clockwork, Ray stood, no mic, just his voice steady but dull, like someone had drained all the color from it. "I want to thank everyone for coming," he said. "Tonight means a lot to me." There was polite clapping. He didn't acknowledge my speech, not directly, not even with a nod. Instead, he continued, "Family is complicated, but we do our best. We show up." And that was it. No apology, no recognition, just a vague attempt at reclaiming the narrative. I almost laughed. We do our best. For a man who had ghosted his only son from the guest list that was rich. Then came the second twist. As people started milling toward the dessert table, Trish came up to me again, her face tight. "Hey," she said under her breath, "I probably shouldn't say anything, but there's a group text. With Lorraine, your dad, Mason, a few others." I blinked. "What kind of group text?" She looked down. "They've been talking about you for months, about keeping you at arm's length, about how you make people uncomfortable when you visit, that you're too intense, that the money stuff makes them feel like they owe you something, and it's not healthy." Her voice dropped even lower. Lorraine called it emotional extortion. I felt my throat close, then reopen with something sharp behind my ribs. Not because I hadn't suspected something like this, but because someone had finally said it out loud. A whole conversation about me had existed behind my back for years. The version of me that paid bills, showed up, smiled through awkward dinners, that wasn't the version they talked about when I wasn't around. They'd rewritten the script, cast me as the villain in my own loyalty. "Can you show me?" I asked. She hesitated. "Trish, please." She looked around, then pulled out her phone, scrolled quickly, and turned the screen toward me. I only needed to see one message. "Mason, 2 months ago, Owen's gonna expect a seat next to Dad if he comes. You know how he is? Shows up with a receipt and wants a trophy," Lorraine's reply. "We didn't ask for the money," he offered. "Guilt doesn't buy a ticket to everything." Ray's name wasn't in that particular thread, but the silence on his end screamed louder than words. I handed her the phone back, trying not to let the tremor in my hands show. "Thank you," I said quietly. "For being honest." She bit her lip. "I thought you should know. You didn't deserve this." No, I didn't. My phone buzzed again. Another text, this time from Mason Smooth. "Move tonight. You really think public shaming gets you Dad's approval? Grow up." I didn't reply. I wasn't going to dignify cowardice disguised as brotherly advice. Instead, I stood and made my way toward the back of the room, toward the hallway that led to the coat check. I needed air. Not just oxygen, but distance from the stink of forced politeness from the rotten core of family politics dressed in cocktail attire. Halfway through the hallway, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned. Ray, alone. He looked tired. Not the kind of tired from work or age, the kind that came from years of avoiding hard truths and finally being cornered by one. "I didn't know she texted you," he said. "No greeting, no warm-up, just that." I crossed my arms. "But you knew about the group chat?" He hesitated. "She showed me some of it. I told her not to send that stuff. Told her to stop talking about you that way." "But you never told me." His jaw clenched. What was I supposed to say? "Owen, hey son, my wife thinks you're emotionally manipulative, but thanks for the roof repairs." "Yes," I said. That would have been honest. He looked down, then leaned against the wall, rubbing his face. "I didn't ask you to take care of us." "No, I said you let me." That landed. He shifted, uncomfortable. "You made it easy to rely on you," he admitted. "After the layoffs, after the medical bills, it just felt good to be needed again." Lorraine helped me feel proud again, like I wasn't just waiting to die in that house. "And what about me?" I asked. What was I supposed to feel? Like I didn't exist unless I was wiring money, like I needed to earn my way into my own family. He didn't answer, just stared at a spot on the wall, as if waiting for it to offer a way out. I stepped closer. "You used to be the guy who taught me that showing up mattered, that promises meant something. What happened to that guy?" "He got old," Ray whispered, "and scared, and weak." We stood there in silence. Then I asked, "Was I really not invited?" Another beat. "No," he said. "Lorraine didn't want you here. She said it would be awkward. That you'd make a scene. I told her we'd figure it out. But I didn't fight her. I didn't stop her. That was the worst part. Not that Lorraine had tried to shut me out, but that he'd let her." "I need to get out of here," I said. "I'm done pretending this is normal." Ray didn't argue. He just looked at me with something close to sorrow, maybe even shame. As I turned to leave, he said, "What happens now?" I paused. "That depends," I said, "on what you do when she finds out I'm pulling every dollar back." And then I walked out past the glittering tables, the fading jazz, the fake smiles, and into the crisp night air where everything finally felt real. My phone buzzed again. A new text. From Lorraine. "You're making a huge mistake. You think people will believe you over me." I didn't respond. Not yet. But I would. Back in the hotel room, the walls felt too clean, too quiet, like they hadn't earned the kind of night I'd just had. I kicked off my shoes, tossed the jacket onto a chair, and sank into the edge of the bed, staring at Lorraine's message, still glowing on my phone. "You think people will believe you over me?" The arrogance, the confidence, the threat. I reread it 5 times, not because I didn't understand it, but because I wanted to feel the weight of her words before I decided how to respond. In the bathroom mirror, I caught a glimpse of myself, the guy who used to believe he could keep everyone afloat with just a little more effort, a little more patience, a little more cash. But the eyes looking back at me now weren't apologizing anymore. They were calculating, focused, calm. That version of me, the one Lorraine had counted on to stay silent, was gone. I poured a glass of water, sat down, and opened my laptop. If they wanted to escalate this, fine. But it wasn't going to be a shouting match at a family function. I was going to handle this like I handled every project I'd ever rescued from collapsed structure fax documentation. First, I pulled every bank transfer from the past 6 years, labeled each one, home repairs, back medical car replacement anniversary cruise, that one still stung, 212, 384 total, not including interest. Then came the text records. I found the thread from the month Ray had surgery when I'd overnighted $9,000 for what I was told were emergency bills. That same week, Lorraine posted a photo in Sedona with a caption about healing energy and desert peace. The caption tagged a spa resort. I screenshotted it all. I didn't know what I'd do with it yet, but I was done letting people weaponize silence. Around midnight, my phone buzzed again. Unknown number. Another message. You're not thinking clearly. You're emotional. Don't make this worse than it already is. I didn't reply, but I took a screenshot, filed it in a folder I'd just created, Toledo Fallout. By morning, my inbox had 2 more emails, one from my dad's subject line. We need to talk. No body, no signature, just that. The second was from Aunt Patty. Hers was longer. Owen, I don't want to interfere, but I want you to know I'm proud of you. You spoke your truth, and it needed to be said. Some folks might not like it, but the people who matter heard you. Call me when you're ready. Love, P. I responded to her first, told her I appreciated the support and that I might need a witness if this thing spun further. Her reply came fast, always. The next day, I took a walk through the neighborhood I grew up in. The houses were smaller than I remembered. The air smelled like late summer and damp mulch. I stopped in front of our old house, mine and Dad's back, before Lorraine, before the guilt and the game playing. The siding was new, the lawn trimmed perfectly, but the soul of it felt hollow now, like it had been cleared out to make room for someone else's narrative. I took a breath and called my lawyer, not for a lawsuit, at least not yet. I wanted advice. She listened carefully, asked precise questions. Were any of the payments structured as loans, she asked. Did you ever get anything in writing? Some texts, I said, and a couple of email confirmations when I wired larger sums. No formal agreements. Okay, she said. It's murky, but not impossible, especially if they misrepresented how the money would be used. That can fall under constructive fraud. It's not easy to prove, but it is something. I hesitated. I'm not trying to sue my father. You're trying to set a boundary, she said, and sometimes legal pressure is the only language people like Lorraine understand. I didn't like the idea of dragging my father through legal letters, but I also couldn't let this slide, not when she was already spinning a narrative behind the scenes. If she could paint me as unstable, controlling, vengeful, she could isolate him entirely. He was vulnerable, maybe more than I wanted to admit. So I made a decision. I typed up a document, simple, clear, factual. A full list of financial support provided over the past 6 years, categorized with transaction IDs and reference notes. I included a short paragraph stating that I was formally withdrawing all future financial support and expected acknowledgment of receipt. It wasn't an invoice. It wasn't a threat. But it was documentation. I CC'd my attorney and hit send. Within 5 minutes, Ray called. I let it go to voicemail. Then Lorraine called. Twice, no message. Then Mason. He didn't even try to hide his anger. What the hell are you doing? You're going to ruin him. He let himself be ruined, I said calmly. I just stopped paying for it. He's yours, Mason hissed. Then maybe he should act like one. He hung up. No surprise, just there. That night, Aunt Patty called me again. They're scrambling, she said. Lorraine's calling cousins trying to do damage control. Said you're threatening the family. Good, I said. Let her spin it. I've got receipts and a memory. Ray doesn't look good, she added after a beat. He's not saying much. I think he's ashamed. I wanted to feel something. Sadness, sympathy, anything. But I was tired of carrying that weight alone. Then maybe he needs to sit with it, I said, like I've been doing for years. There was a pause. I understand, she said quietly. I hung up, exhaled, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I slept without clenching my jaw. But the next morning, something strange happened. My lawyer forwarded me an email that had been blind copied to her. It was from Lorraine. To several extended family members. Subject line, let's talk about Owen. I clicked it open, and what I saw made my blood run cold. The subject line, let's talk about Owen, was chilling in its casual venom. I sat on the edge of the hotel bed, heart pounding, jaw clenched. I clicked the email open like I was peeling back the bandage on a wound I hadn't even known was still bleeding. Lorraine's message was methodical, cold, polished, and deliberately manipulative. It wasn't a rage-filled rant. That would have been easier to dismiss. No, This was crafted to sow doubt, to reframe me as unstable, bitter, entitled. She began with a cheery veneer. "Hi everyone, I wasn't going to send this. But after recent events, I feel it's time we clear the air and protect the people we love. That's how it always starts with love." Then came the real poison. We've watched Owen struggle for years with emotional boundaries. He has a tendency to weaponize money and guilt, even when help wasn't asked for. It's sad, honestly. We love him, but love doesn't mean enabling harmful behavior. If he chooses to take things public, we may have to set hard boundaries to protect Ray. Protect Ray from me. I scrolled down, stunned. The email was blind copied to a list of relatives, many of whom I hadn't spoken to in years, people who only knew fragments of my life fed through filtered Facebook posts and holiday hearsay. Lorraine was smart. She knew how to frame a narrative so that her coldness looked like concern, her control like care. I felt sick. But I wasn't surprised. This was her playbook: disarm first, then destroy. And now she was trying to erase me not just from Ray's life, but from the family legacy entirely. I forwarded the email to my attorney with a single line: "So this is war." Then I stood, got dressed, and drove back to the one person who still had skin in this game, Ray. When he opened the door, I could barely recognize him. He looked smaller, not physically, but spiritually. His eyes were sunken, his jaw unshaven. A man unraveling. "I figured you'd come," he said. Saw the email. He stepped aside. I walked in without speaking. The house smelled like stale incense and last night's dishes. Lorraine wasn't home. Thank God. I turned to him. "You saw it. So, what are you going to do about it?" Ray sighed and sat down heavily on the couch, palms resting on his knees. "It's complicated, Owen." "No, it's not," I snapped. "She's trying to paint me as unstable. She's erasing everything I did for this family. You let her shut me out, and now you're letting her lie to everyone I've ever loved." He winced. "I didn't ask her to send it. But you didn't stop her." That silence between us swelled like a wave. I paced, heart pounding. "This is who she is, Dad. And deep down, I think you know that. She's isolated you. Controlled the narrative. You used to call me every weekend. Now I'm just a threat." He looked up slowly. "You made it hard, Owen. You kept receipts. You reminded us what we owed. You didn't let us forget that we were drowning." "Because you were," I said, voice cracking. "And I was the only one throwing you a damn rope. Did you ever ask what that felt like? Being the lifeline, no one even thanked?" He looked away. I was ashamed. "No, you were comfortable. There's a difference." I sat across from him. "This isn't just about money, or that party, or even Lorraine. This is about you deciding what kind of man you want to be in the final chapters of your life. Do you want to be a husband who hides behind his wife's lies, or a father who stands up for the son who never stopped showing up?" The question hung in the air. Ray didn't answer. So I stood. "Here's what's going to happen," I said. "I'm going public. If Lorraine wants to escalate, I'll match her step for step. I'll release the financial records, the texts, the screenshots. Hell, I'll tell every reporter in Toledo about the woman who used her husband's son as a walking checkbook." He flinched. "Please don't." "Then you stop her. You tell the truth. You send a correction. You set the record straight. Or I will." He didn't answer. But that night, something shifted. 3 hours later, Patty texted me. "Ray just sent a group email. Short, but he said he stands by you. Told them you supported him more than anyone and that Lorraine's message didn't represent him." My chest tightened. It wasn't a full victory, but it was something. A crack in her armor. The next morning, Lorraine called. I let it go to voicemail. Then she sent a text. "You think you've won something? You're naive. Families forget the favors. They remember the drama. That's what they'll remember about you." I didn't reply. Instead, I posted a single photo to my private family group chat, one that hadn't been used in over a year. It was me and Ray 12 years ago at my college graduation. His arm around my shoulder, pride in his eyes. Caption: "I still remember who we were before all the noise. Not too late to come back to it." Seen by 14 people. No replies. Until one. From Mason. Just one word. "Maybe." Then 2 minutes later, another message came through. From a number I didn't recognize. No words, just a video. A hidden camera clip. Ray, Lorraine, arguing in their kitchen. And what she said next changed everything. "You think I married you for love? Please. Owen was the investment. You were just the access." I froze, then hit play again. The video was only 47 seconds long, but it detonated years of denial in under a minute. Lorraine's voice, sharp and dripping with disdain, rang in my ears on loop. "Owen was the investment. You were just the access." She wasn't even shouting. She said it like she was stating the weather. Like it had never even occurred to her to hide the truth anymore. I watched Ray in the video, stunned and silent, like a man hearing his own eulogy while still breathing. His face, pale, confused, broken, was the kind of expression you never forget. And whoever had sent the video wanted me to remember. There was no signature, no caption, just a number I didn't recognize from a Cleveland area code. For a moment I thought maybe it was Mason, maybe even Patty, but deep down, I knew. Someone close to Lorraine had finally had enough. Someone who saw what I saw and realized it wasn't just toxic anymore, it was treacherous. I saved the clip, encrypted it in a drive folder, and stared out the window as the sun began rising behind the Cleveland skyline. The final act was here. 3 hours later, I was sitting across from Ray again. He looked worse than before, like that one sentence had pulled every illusion out from under him. He didn't speak for the first 5 minutes, just stared at the kitchen table, hands clasped so tight his knuckles went white. "She said it," I finally said. "You heard it." He nodded slowly. "She never loved me." I didn't correct him. I didn't soften the blow. Sometimes the truth isn't meant to be padded. It's meant to crack you open so something new can finally grow. "She married me because of you," he continued, "because you were her golden goose. And I made that easy. I was proud of you, of what you built. I thought, if she loved you, maybe she'd love me too." That admission hit harder than I expected. Ray wasn't a monster. He was a lonely man who mistook admiration for affection. And Lorraine knew exactly how to exploit that. "I let her convince me you were manipulative," he added, "that your anger was a threat, that your generosity came with strings. But it wasn't you. It was guilt. I knew what I let happen, and instead of apologizing, I let her weaponize it. You can still fix it," I said, "but you need to cut her off, for real. No more second chances. No quiet forgiveness." He looked up at me, eyes rimmed red. I already told her to leave. I blinked. "What?" "This morning. I sent her the video, told her I wanted a separation. She said I was pathetic and walked out. A long silence followed, the kind that wraps around you like fog, not sure whether to comfort or chill. Then he added, "I don't have much left, Owen. Not friends, not money, not even reputation. But if there's any chance of earning back your trust, I'll take it." That was the closest he'd come to saying he loved me in years. And maybe it was enough. Not to erase what happened, but to acknowledge it. To start from a place that wasn't built on debt and disappointment. "I'll help you," I said, "but not financially, not anymore. This time we rebuild something honest." Ray nodded once. It wasn't a dramatic redemption arc, just a man finally owning his part in the mess. That was all I needed. 2 weeks passed. The smear campaign died quietly. Patty, bless her heart, did subtle cleanup in the family group chats. One cousin even messaged me privately. "I'm sorry. I didn't know the whole story. Lorraine always made it sound like you were controlling." I didn't respond, not because I was bitter, but because I'd stopped needing validation from people who only showed up when the tide turned. Mason surprisingly reached out next. He asked to meet. We sat in a coffee shop that reeked of burnt espresso and old carpet. He looked different, less smug, more real. "I watched the video," he said, "twice. I didn't want to believe it, but I get it now." I stayed quiet. "I resented you," he continued. "Not because you had more, but because you gave more. And I knew I'd never be that kind of son. Not for Dad, not for anyone." It wasn't quite an apology, but it was more than I ever expected. We left it there unresolved, but no longer toxic. Then came the final twist. A letter arrived at my door, handwritten, no return address. I opened it carefully. "Owen, I don't expect forgiveness, but I do want you to understand. I married Ray because I was tired of struggling. You were impressive even back then, confident, controlled, generous to a fault. I thought I could play the long game, that I could keep you close enough to benefit but far enough to never feel small. But the truth is you made me feel irrelevant. Not by what you said, but by who you were. I don't hate you, I just couldn't compete with you. And instead of growing, I destroyed." It was both confession and curse. I didn't share it with Ray. He didn't need it, and I didn't reply. Some months later, Ray and I started volunteering at a local veterans center together. Small things, fixing old HVAC units, organizing supplies. No one knew our story. And that was the best part. We were just two men showing up doing the work. On a quiet Wednesday afternoon, Ray turned to me and said, "You know, for the first time in a long time, I don't feel like I'm waiting to be replaced." I smiled. "You're not. You're just finally showing up." And that was enough. But just when I thought the story had settled, my phone buzzed with a new message. Unknown number. A photo. Lorraine, with a man I didn't recognize. Caption, you should probably know who's been helping her since the beginning. I stared at the screen and felt the storm shift direction again. Story 2. Grace is my name. I recently received my degree in business communications from a tiny Pennsylvania college, and I am 24 years old. 3 years ago, I would have laughed out if you had asked me if I would eventually return to my parents' old beige house in the Pittsburgh suburbs after college. However, life has a humorous way of reminding you that things don't always go as planned. On a somber April afternoon, I clutched the handle of my battered bag and headed back to my family's comfortable beige home. But I kept telling myself that this was only going to last for 3 months, maybe 4 at most, and that I would save up enough money for a down payment on a modest apartment close to the city center. I'd already seen it in my imagination. A warm kitchen, large windows that let in plenty of natural light, and peaceful nights spent with just me and a nice cup of tea. Fortunately, the job search didn't take as long as I had anticipated. Madison & Cole, a rapidly expanding marketing agency in downtown Pittsburgh, made me an offer within 2 weeks. Although the initial pay wasn't very substantial, it was sufficient to provide me a sense of security. The quarterly performance bonuses also seemed like a good idea. I may achieve my objective of financial freedom even more quickly if I performed well. I sat with my folks at the dining table that evening. Excitement fills my heart. Dad was looking through an old newspaper as Mom was preparing tomato meatballs. I was unable to contain myself any longer, so I joyfully declared that I had been hired by Madison & Cole. The clinking of knives and forks ceased instantly, before I even noticed the difference in the air, and there are quarterly incentives in addition to a good pay. Mom set her fork down. Her eyes were serious. Will you be moving out soon? Her tone was calm yet icy as she inquired. My smile vanished from my lips as I froze. Yes, most likely in 3 or 4 months. Prior to renting my own house, I would like to save a bit more money. An all too familiar gaze that seldom indicated anything positive was exchanged between my parents. Dad began the same old lecture after clearing his throat. Grace, you are aware that due to her back condition and mine, your mother is only able to work part-time at the library. He paused. At the plant there are whispers of layoffs, Mom said, sounding as though she were delivering a heartbreaking story. Your assistance with family expenditures is much needed. It would be easier for your work if you stayed here for free. Don't you think that just makes more sense? I felt a weight in my chest as I gazed down at the cooling meatballs on my plate. Another part of me, the one that yearned for independence, roared in protest, even if they weren't incorrect. Finally, I faked a grin and nodded. I suppose I can remain a bit longer. Suddenly, my new existence had begun. I enjoyed supper with my parents, got up early for work, and helped out with the utility bills at night. It appeared to be all right at first. I kept telling myself that I was doing the right thing by supporting my family for the time being, and that I would soon have a place of my own. I kept telling myself it was only a passing phase. 3 months would pass quickly, but by the time the 4th month arrived, I began to realize that something was seriously off. Mom was waiting for me in the living room one Friday night when I arrived home from a long, demanding day of working on a new client campaign. On the table before her, a sizable envelope appeared, as though it had been there all day. When she talked, I hadn't even removed my shoes. Although she spoke softly, her voice was colder as the winter wind outside. With your present pay, Grace, your father and I performed some calculations. You are able to make a larger contribution to household costs. I blinked as a shiver went through my body. What are you saying? Dad's remarks trailed off as he left the kitchen with a water bill. Electricity, water, online, everything is rising. We cannot continue to cover it alone. The offer of no rent had initially been simply nice talk, so I tightened my hold on my bag's strap. They had everything set up to encourage me to pay extra now that I was settling into my work. I already make weekly grocery purchases. I added attempting to maintain my composure, and I have also been paying my electricity bills since last month. Mom gave me a sad little grin and shook her head. Grace, that's only a little portion. We truly need you to give a certain amount each month at this time. Consider it a form of family duty sharing. With a sinking heart, I gripped my bag tighter. Every time I felt like I was moving forward, I felt like I was being yanked back by another unseen chain. I was only going to be here for a couple of months. With a cracked voice, I reminded them. To move out, I'm saving money. Dad's face hardened as he crossed his arms. While saving money is a wonderful thing, family is family. When we need you, you can't abandon us. The line, family is family, kept repeating in my mind like a depressing, never-ending tune. Too exhausted to protest, I gave a soft yes and rushed upstairs, swallowing the knot in my throat. In the days that followed, everything seemed to be under a thin coating of pressure. Light talk was no longer part of dinner. It was a constant barrage of subliminal warnings about new costs, roof repairs, and growing gas bills. Mom would remark as she held the heating bill, "This winter is really harsh. It would be so much simpler if someone could provide a bit more." Silently, with a growing sense of bitterness, I ate my cold soup. I was working on Madison and Cole's quarterly report at my desk one Saturday afternoon when Mom came in the door with a stack of family health insurance documents. Her comments were piercing, yet she had a charming grin. "Grace, we thought you might be able to assist with a tiny portion of the insurance premiums. Health is everything you know." I gazed up at her as if she were a stranger. "I don't even currently have my own insurance, Mom. You're healthy and youthful. You'll be all right." As if it were entirely normal for me to be carrying the whole family that night, while resting in my old room and listening to the howling wind outside, she interrupted me with a breezy voice. When precisely had I become the walking pocketbook of the family, I wondered. My initial strategy to save for 3 months and move out right immediately was as flimsy as smoke and was quickly derailed by guilt trips, sharp remarks and suggestive looks cloaked in worry. I understood that I would never be permitted to leave this house if I remained there. I shut my eyes. My chest was heavy with the weight of an unformed choice, but a small flame glowed deep inside. I knew I couldn't continue to be this way indefinitely. I hadn't even planned my next course of action yet. When the front door opened one Sunday afternoon, a chilly October wind blew in. My sister, Lauren, who was 8 years my senior, was married to Craig and had 2 little children, Mason, who was 3, and Ella, who was 5. Despite living 2 states away, she unexpectedly arrived today with her entire family. The hall echoed with laughter. Grace reclined back in the music, while Ian went for the gases. Craig, Travis, and I. In fact, in Mason, I'm being crowded out by all of the males. It's been a long time. She hurried over, giving the children hugs and gushing over them as if they were the cutest creatures in the world. I silently watched from the kitchen doorway while holding a glass of water. A part of me was already accustomed to this, the way Dad left his favorite sports show to meet Craig at the door, the way Mom brightened up when she saw Lauren, the way everything in the home felt so alive, only when Lauren was present. "Could you get Craig another glass, Grace?" Without even looking at me, Mom replied in a lovely voice. Silently, I put down my glass of water and got another, like a shadow sweeping over the space. I discovered something new that evening. The fact that I had grown up, graduated with honors, and was responsible for a significant portion of the family costs didn't matter. My parents would always see me as Lauren's supporting cast member. She was the subject of every talk during supper. Mom was always inquiring about the new home. Craig and Lauren had recently purchased the opulent Christmas trip they had planned, or the fancy school they were thinking of enrolling Ella in. "Is Ella yet to learn to read?" With pride gleaming in her eyes, my mother inquired. "Mom, she's reading children's books already." Lauren smiled. "Mason is also learning to swim. He's doing great. That's fantastic." With a proud expression on her face, Mom turned to face my dad and shouted, "Our daughter is very exceptional." I was not questioned about my work at Madison and Cole. Nobody cared that I was attempting, nor did they inquire about the campaigns I had won or the late hours I spent trying to make deadlines. That I was creating my own life. After supper, as I was doing the dishes, I broke up my meatball into little pieces and chewed quietly, hardly tasting anything. Behind me, Lauren emerged nonchalantly, drinking a glass of white wine while resting on the kitchen counter. "Are you still residing here?" She laughed as though it were the strangest thing ever. "Yes," I said quickly as I scrubbed a dish in the hot water. "She's suggesting that it's a little strange to live with your parents at this age." I turned and met her eyes, which were the same shade of light blue as Mom's. I tried to seem cool as I added, "I'm here to help them pay the bills." Lauren took another sip and shrugged. "It has to be done by someone. They're lucky to have you." Despite her kind smile, every word was painful. That night I picked at my chest. I'm sitting in my room as Craig and Lauren joke in the living room. I was no longer even depressed, simply a chilly numbness. I was never picked first. In this house, I had never even been an option. I was only the stand-in, the underpaid assistant, and the backup. When Lauren's spotlight became a bit dimmer, Clearer than ever, the concept inched its way into my head. No one would save me if I didn't. It was all over in an instant. Lauren and Craig moved in with my parents for a short time just 2 weeks ago, saying their new home was being renovated. After a hard day at work, I can still clearly recall that afternoon when I dragged myself up the porch stairs only to find their SUV parked outside and hear the kids' loud shrieks coming from the yard. Mom, I had never seen her face light up that brightly, met me at the entrance. Grace, I'm glad you're back home. Mason and Ella are vivacious. I can't keep up with you and your dad. Mason slammed into my legs before I had even removed my coat. Lauren circles the couch while holding a marker in her chocolate-stained hands. From the kitchen, Lauren stuck her head out. Her blonde hair was tied back. She had a cheerful, carefree face. My dear. The timing was ideal. We were considering going out to eat dinner. You don't mind spending a few hours watching the children, do you? I started to object, but my mother spoke first. Her voice was as sweet as honey. I'm not as sprite as your father, and I used to be, you know. You're the only one who can keep up with them, Grace. I surveyed the unkempt house. There are toys all over the place. I swallowed the lump in my throat and noticed fresh stains on the carpet. Just a couple of hours, I mumbled, trying to convince myself. However, a few hours was never just that. After dinner, there were drinks with friends, coffee, and a late-night movie. I stayed up until almost midnight that night, urging Mason to fall asleep as she sobbed for her mother. I attempted to sit down with my parents the following day to express how overwhelmed I was, but all I received were contemptuous glances. All night long, my back was hurting. Dad rubbed his hip and moaned. I am no longer able to chase after the little ones. Emotionally, mainly for herself, she sighed. I also suffered from a headache all morning. Grace, they can only be handled by someone as young and powerful as you. Thus, an implicit agreement was reached. The default babysitter was Grace. I worked from 8 to 5, came home exhausted, and immediately became the unpaid nanny. On weekends, when my buddies went on excursions, attended festivals, or just slept in, I juggled Mason's meals, Ella's coloring sessions, tidying up the house before my parents' impromptu gatherings. Once I dared to ask for a weekend off, only to be met with a surprised stare, as if I had just done a severe sin. You can't just think about yourself, Grace, Mom murmured, her voice laden with remorse. Lauren and Craig need some time together. The kids are little. Who else will care for them if not you? I kept silent in this house. Every debate focused on one issue, everyone else's needs. Mine just didn't exist. Worse, Lauren began to accept my presence as a given. Every time I stepped through the door after work, she was there waving a list of duties. Feed Mason. Help Ella with preschool tasks. Laundry should be folded. Toys should be cleaned. Lauren once stated, "We're going on a date night." As I bounced a sobbing Mason on my hip, I applied lipstick in front of the living room mirror. You'll get it eventually. For you, this is a positive, real-world experience. I gritted my teeth, feeling as though I were being bound to someone else's life. I could feel myself losing small parts of myself every day. And a voice continued to get louder in the background. Grace, it's time to change. Nobody will get up if you don't. As I entered the room on a chilly Tuesday night, I received the news. Lauren sat tensely at the kitchen table, holding her phone tightly. With his hands raking through his disheveled brown hair, Craig was pacing the living room. Mom showed up before I could inquire what was going on. She sounded as though she had just been struck. Get ready. We must speak. I felt sick to my stomach as I untied my scarf. Mom spoke hastily, wringing her hands. I just got notice. His business failed. Lauren's family's primary source of income was lost. I turned to face Lauren. She sat with one hand over her face, her shoulders trembling a little, and her head down. Even though I knew she was my sister, I was still feeling uneasy. Dream. What is the current plan? Trying to speak steadily, I asked. With a look of desperation in her eyes, Mom looked at Dad and then back at me, suggesting that they should temporarily move in here until they were able to get back on their feet. With 4 extra people and the constant pandemonium of 2 tiny children, our 4-bedroom house already seemed claustrophobic, so I froze. How about my room? With a constricted throat, I asked. Mom took a while to respond. We've spoken about it, Dad added, clearing his throat. Mason and Ella require a secure environment in which to play. We believe you ought to vacate your room. And me, I swallowed hard, as if saying it quickly would make it sound less crazy, Mom added. You can move into the storage room. Grace, only for a short bit. You're still young, you will adapt. I tasted blood as I bit my lip so hard. The storage space. There was hardly enough room for a desk and a twin bed. The spot where old Christmas ornaments and stacks of newspapers that Dad couldn't discard had always been stacked high. I felt like screaming. I wanted to know why my needs were prioritized over everyone else's. Instead, feeling as though my life had been stolen once more, I simply nodded rigidly and went upstairs. Every time I took another box out of the storage room that weekend, I cleaned it up. I became numb in one place. For years, my bedroom served as my haven. It was carpeted, repainted in gentle colors, and stocked with toys. On the day Lauren and Craig arrived home, the house became a frenzied swarm. Mason and Ella let loose and yelled through the corridors. While Craig struggled in the dining room with Mason's crib, Lauren ruled her court like a queen directing the furnishings. Mom was infatuated with the children and couldn't stop. Dad made Craig coffee as if he were a distinguished visitor. And me, I disappeared into my new room, rebuilding my frail twin bed while fighting back sighs. After everything had subsided that evening, I went to the kitchen to get something to eat. The noises of a cartoon Ella was watching filled the living room, and a platter of cold cookies was resting on the table. Mom remarked, "Grace, could you watch Ella and Mason tomorrow?" as soon as she saw me. "Craig and Lauren need to finish off some paperwork." I went cold. "I'm employed." In a hoarse voice, I reminded her. "Only at night." She mentioned that platters were already being cleared. "Only a few of ours. You're still young. You're capable of managing it." I can hardly recall how I got back to my small room that evening. All I know is that while I laid there, I heard Mom gently telling Lauren that everything will be well, Ella laughing, and loud phone calls. All I had left was this small room and a sense of loneliness that seemed to permeate every breath. The fact that Lauren and Craig's move-in was the start of a true nightmare quickly became apparent. Mason's yelling at 6 in the morning now marked the beginning of my days. Ella knocked on my door whenever she could. Before work even gave me 5 minutes of solitude, the home was rumbling with footfall toys clattering and cartoons blasting in my little room. I hadn't even opened my eyes yet. Mason would frequently infiltrate and cover my papers with cookie crumbs or crayon smears. I once scraped crayon stains off a client contract due for the whole night. Craig and Lauren lived like they were on vacation the following morning. The majority of Lauren's time was spent conversing with friends or browsing social media. Craig sat at the kitchen table and seemed to be looking for a job, but he was really just playing games. Parents. It was turmoil that exhilarated them. Mom would laugh every time I brought up the mess or the loudness. They are only children. Give them freedom. Dad wouldn't. The chaos and commotion were evidence of a contented family. I dragged myself home from work just to be caught up in the same never-ending loop. Watching children, preparing food, cleaning, dinner turned into a mad dash. Chopping Mason's meal and cleaning up Ella's liquid. I was forcing myself to eat my own cold leftovers. Even worse, the costs began to soar. I had to read the new power bill 3 times before I could see it clearly. Due to my parents' meager pensions and Lauren and Craig's unstable financial situation, it was almost double what it had been, and it all landed on me. Despite my best efforts to remain composed, my hands trembled. As I brought it up at dinner one Thursday night, I placed the power bill on the table and said, "We need to talk about the bills. I can't continue to cover everything on my own." Lauren frowned as she raised her head from her phone. "It's incredibly rude of you to bring up money at this time, Grace." Mom spoke up right away, her tone full of criticism. "Craig and Lauren are having a hard time, you know. Family members are meant to help one another. It's not nickel and dime, everything." I tightened my chest and balled my fists beneath the table. "And who's on my side?" My voice trembled as I asked. "I also have a full-time job. I have to put money down for my own future." Craig mumbled and snorted. "The future is saving for later that year, really necessary for a single girl." It was like being slapped across the face. My chair squealed on the floor as I got to my feet. I took the money in my hands and remarked icily, "I understand. I'll do my share. The remainder, try it yourself." I pivoted and made my way back to the storage area. Behind me, like 1,000 small blades, came the sound of laughing and whispered remarks. I had trouble sleeping that night. I listened to footsteps racing down the hallway while I lay awake on the little bed. My mother whispering about how Lauren manages family pressure so well while the late-night TV blares below. One idea burned brightly in my thoughts amid the shadows. I couldn't continue to live this way. If I continued to remain, for the first time in months, I would lose what remained of myself. I opened my laptop, sat up, and began looking for flats. I was leaving even though I wasn't sure where I was heading yet. And I wasn't turning around this time. I had just finished brewing my coffee on Saturday morning when Mom came into the kitchen with a large bundle of money. With a loud thud, as though she wanted everyone to hear, she dropped it on the table. "Grace, we must discuss the bills for groceries, water power, and the internet." With a solemn look, she started. I put down my coffee. My heart is lowering. I knew this was going to be a bad conversation. "Everything has become more costly," Mom said, her tone hinting at resentment. "The population of this place has increased. Costs are greater, of course." I tried to remain composed as I nodded. "For that reason, I proposed." Slowly, I stated that everyone should properly split the cost of life. I have a piece and each family has a piece. Everyone will find it simpler in this way. Suddenly, there was stillness in the kitchen. Lauren descended the steps. Her face appeared as fresh as if nothing had happened, and her hair was immaculate. She laughed dryly when she overheard the talk, sending shivers down my spine. "Grace," Lauren stated in a sarcastic yet honey-sweet voice. "Will you truly take advantage of your own family?" Craig yelled from the living room, delivering yet another insult that infuriated me. "You still have the guts to bring this up while we're having a hard time." He shook his head inwardly, as if I were the most unappreciative kid in America. "Family is about grace and sacrifice. It's not always possible to focus on money." With a voice as hard as a gavel, Mom struck the last blow. "If you refuse to assist while the family is having difficulties, which type of family member do you belong to?" I swallowed all the arguments that were lodged in my throat and bit my lip hard. Any explanation I offered would simply be dismissed as being unappreciative. They wanted to give me a smack. I felt a firm grip on my heart as I turned away. Like the coldness that was creeping up on me, the coffee in my hand had gone cold. My animosity was no longer a simmering ache after that day. It developed into a storm that grew stronger every day. I continued to serve as Lauren and Craig's free weekend babysitter. Lauren would contact me every Friday afternoon with something like, "Craig and I have plans. You will see Ellen Mason writing tomorrow evening. Regards, my love." Like it was inevitable. It's not worth asking. My parents continued to make excuses for their health. Whenever I suggested that they might be able to assist. "Dad is experiencing headaches. Ari's mother is experiencing back pain. Grace, we're becoming old." Time and again, the same broken record. I was caught in a never-ending circle in the meanwhile. Work, clean, babysit, and pay bills. I once had the audacity to refuse basic SMS messages. It's a hectic weekend for me, not able to watch children. My phone exploded with missed calls and guilt trip texts from Lauren, my dad, and my mother in a matter of minutes, all of which had the same accusatory tone. "The family is being let down by you. Your sister has endured a great deal. Only self-centered individuals abandon their families at difficult times." At this point, every phrase seemed like a stab to my dignity. I didn't feel bad. I simply felt empty. While I was cleaning up the toys that were all over the living room on Sunday night, Lauren came in carrying a smoothie. "Tomorrow morning, Craig and I are going to look at model homes," she replied nonchalantly. "You will thus have to supervise the children once more." I felt like ice as I froze and stared at her. "You are aware that I also have a life, even though I spoke with such a severe tone." Lauren grinned icily and shrugged. "Oh, Grace, you work a desk job and live with your folks. What on earth is keeping you so busy?" I straightened up and looked her in the eyes. I wasn't afraid for the first time in months, without hesitation. "Just wait," I whispered. "Soon enough, you'll know." Lauren's irritated, perplexed countenance was gone as I turned and left. A plan was developing inside of me, and this time I vowed that no one would ever again shatter my aspirations. In the little storage area, I sat huddled up. Uneven shadows are being produced on the walls by the low light from an ancient desk lamp. I was holding a text message from my college closest friend, Rachel. This weekend, Grace was organizing a ski vacation to Blue Ridge Mountain. "Join us. Do you need a vacation from that crazy home torn?" I gazed at the television. I had the need to say no. As usual, I was afraid too busy or had family responsibilities. This time, however, I felt a strong need. I needed to go. I needed to take a breath. I had to remind myself that there was more to life than this never-ending cycle of paying bills, taking care of the kids, and cleaning. I returned the type. "I'm on board. Please reserve a space for me." Then I heard someone knock on the door. Lauren took a quick look inside. Her flawless golden locks were wrapped up nicely. She smiled as if she had never experienced adversity. "Bravo," she sang. This Saturday, Craig and I received an invitation to Uncle Gene's birthday celebration downtown. Dad and Mom are also coming. "You're going to watch Ellen Mason," My voice sounded quieter than I had anticipated. "I'm sorry, but this weekend I won't be home." Lauren scowled, unable to comprehend, as if I were going snowboarding with my pals. I spoke it again, focusing on each word. The room's air felt as though it had frozen. "You're joking." Lauren laughed sharply. "This is a family matter, Grace." "I'm not joking, though," I murmured as I got to my feet, experiencing a surge of fresh power. "I am entitled to my own life. I'm no longer your free babysitter." Shouting reverberated below within minutes. Pride Month. However, they are all contributing to a disorganized chorus of indignation. "You're leaving your family behind to go skiing, Grace." Mom let out a cry. "Your lack of responsibility is astounding," Dad snarled. "You violated the confidence we had in you," Craig added, as though he was the most qualified person to talk to her. Squeezed. Lauren's voice was quivering with rage as she pointed a finger directly at me. "Don't ever return if you leave this house this weekend." Her words were like a hammer to my chest, but instead of falling apart as they would have, I just grinned. I hadn't smiled so freely in months. I replied icily, "Don't worry. I have no plans to return, therefore I'm going." As though they were still in shock over what they had just heard, they stood still. However, I didn't give them time to respond. I went upstairs, turned around, and began packing. Just a few of outfits, my laptop, and private documents. I was prepared to abandon the others without hesitation. Behind me, I could hear my father yelling, my mother sobbing from below, and Lauren's irate voice whirling like a whirlwind. However, I didn't turn around, not once. I was driving my old automobile right out of the street a few hours later. I had moved on from the oppressive walls and the people who could only make demands and never comprehend. I slept on Rachel's little couch that night, in a warm, laughing-filled apartment. In a long time, for the first time, I was able to breathe air free of expectations and bitterness. I awoke the next morning on Rachel's couch. I imagined a peculiar sensation of comfort, a feeling I had forgotten for months as weak winter sunshine filtered through the drapes. I was given a steaming cup of coffee by Rachel, Grace Soul. "Are you certain?" With pride and concern in her eyes, she inquired. I grinned. "I'm confident it's more certain than ever." I returned to the old house that same day, not to make amends or engage in negotiations, but to put a stop to everything. Everyone in the family appeared to be waiting. Mom sat with an icy expression on her face in the living room. Dad was clearly disappointed and had his arms crossed. As the children played with toys on the floor, blissfully oblivious to the impending storm, Lauren stood behind Craig, her lips pushed together. I inhaled deeply before moving to the middle of the space. Calmly, I responded, "I'm come to get the remainder of my belongings. I also want to inform you that I will no longer be residing here as of today. I also don't have any additional living bills to pay." As though the room had been deprived of oxygen, the air became dense. Mom sprang to her feet. She had a gleeful, pale face. "You can't do this, Grace. Families don't desert one another." I fixed my unwavering gaze on her eyes. "No, Mother. This is not how real families take advantage of one another." Dad's voice boomed as he smashed his fist on the armrest. "You are just considering yourself." I swallowed, feeling a surge of rage, and responded with an odd composure. "For years I've been considering everyone else. It's time to consider myself now." Lauren crossed her arms and scoffed. "Hold off until you require assistance. You shouldn't count on any of us to support you." With a grin devoid of resentment, I turned to face her. "A family that only understands how to make demands and never once inquires about my well-being is not what I need." As I silently made my way upstairs and collected my last possessions, nobody said. My laptop, my favorite coat, a few beloved novels, and a tiny luggage. That was it. Everything else. The ill-considered presents. I didn't regret leaving behind those painful memories. Mom came running up to me and grabbed my arm as I pulled my bag down the stairs, her eyes desperate. "Please consider it, Grace. This is something you'll regret." I muttered, "No." "Mom, I'd regret staying." As I carefully released my arm from her hold, I pulled the door open. Every nerve in my body awoke as the icy January air struck my face. Like the last period on a long, agonizing chapter, I let the ancient wooden door close behind me as I stepped outside after pulling my bag across the threshold. My phone was constantly buzzing with calls and texts as I drove back to Rachel's little apartment. I knew what they stated without even having to read them. Rachel greeted me with a big grin and a firm embrace. She said, "Welcome back to the world where people love themselves." That evening, drinking hot chocolate while nestled on a stuffed blanket on the little terrace. For the first time in years, I felt really alive. No more stifling pressure, no more charges, just quiet, 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 like a windless winter night. I signed the lease for my first apartment 3 days later, a little light-filled space about 15 minutes from the office. It wasn't flawless. The flooring were ancient, the walls had some cracks, and the heater hummed softly. However, it seemed like a whole kingdom of freedom to me. After hanging the landscape photo on the wall, arranging my books on a shelf, and laying fresh sheets on the bed, I stood in the middle of the room, overcome with an inexplicable sense of happiness. I was going to start over here. I once believed that my first few days in my new flat would never come true. I got myself a nice cup of coffee, sat in the window-facing recliner, and savored the complete tranquility every morning as sunshine streamed into my room. No loud TV, no weeping children. No one yelling my name and making constant requests. Just me, all of my privacy, and total peace. My bank account started to shift, such that it could no longer pay for a household's internet, water, and energy bills. Now, I had enough money coming in from my job to cover my personal needs, rent, and even savings. I was able to afford small pleasures for the first time in years. Dinner at my favorite Italian restaurant and a new book. A beach vacation for the weekend. I joined a local yoga class, met new friends, and gradually created a life free from excessive demands and expectations, a life I never imagined I could have. Naturally, though, my family wasn't amenable to the change. I was just getting set to watch my favorite movie on a Sunday night when I received the first message. Mom sent Grace a text. "I need a conversation with your father. This division of the family cannot continue." Then, "Lauren, are you aware that the children are always inquiring about you? Do you not feel bad about it?" Prague followed shortly after. "The folks who reared you deserve gratitude at the absolute least." Like a swelling wave, the texts were pouring in. The calls began when I didn't answer. Lauren, then Dad, then Mom. Everyone is taking turns. I gripped my phone and watched it repeatedly flash on and off, no longer experiencing guilt. Instead, I felt a calmness that was continuous and frigid. This manipulation of emotions was too familiar to me. Threatening but sweet phrases. Accusations combined with fake tears. It inhaled deeply. I then blocked each number individually, parents, Craig and Lauren. After that, I accessed my social media accounts and disconnected from everyone who would serve as a conduit for their grievances and guilt trips to return to me. It wasn't simple. I fell into the chair feeling as though I had just removed a bulky suit of armor that had held me in place for years. My fingers shook a little as I clicked the block button. I woke up the following morning feeling oddly relieved. There was silence on the phone. No more guilt-tripping calls or demanding texts. I sipped my coffee while seeing the street's naked trees from the window. A little smile appeared on my lips. I didn't regret the decision I had made for myself. On my way home from work that afternoon, I made a stop at a tiny bookshop. I purchased a gorgeous fountain pen, a new notepad, and a nice blue leather cover. I sat down at my workstation that evening, opened the first page, and started writing. This is where my new chapter starts. I was aware that there might be lonely times. On certain evenings, doubt or yearning would creep in. However, I was also aware that I would tackle any situation head-on. Day by day, my new existence became steadier, and I started to learn how to listen to my own voice rather than other people's. Sunlight poured through the window every morning. Hope flooded my heart. Learned to appreciate the little things in life. A tea with a hint of fragrance. On a quiet afternoon, a beloved music is playing while cooking. Take a stroll at the park next to my place. Once these pleasures had been obscured by yells, scowls, and incessant demands. I gradually came to understand that I could live the life I want without permission. I no longer had to make sacrifices for individuals who had never really appreciated me in order to establish my value. I reflected on the years I had pushed myself, put in extra hours to pay the bills, sacrificed valuable weekends to watch kids, and carried about responsible parties that I had never been comfortable with in the first place. I always thought that if I worked hard enough and loved deeply enough, people would ultimately notice me. However, the reality was that my generosity merely gave them a sense of entitlement. I composed a statement late one night as I was making notes in my new notebook. One word at a time. I make a self-promise that I deserve to be respected, loved, and allowed to make my own decisions in life. I came to understand that love is not a mindless sacrifice. It's not sacrificing yourself for crumbs of love. Uplifting, sharing, and respecting one another are all aspects of true love, items that I never got in my previous house. I began establishing limits after that. I gained the ability to refuse irrational requests without feeling bad for prioritizing myself. I took soft skills lessons, worked on my job, and even enrolled in a weekend cooking class, something I had never dared to do previously because I was always giving my time away to other people. Weekends were transformed into priceless times of genuine pleasure rather than being spent stumbling from fatigue. Brief road excursions, coffee dates with pals, cozy nights, reading under a lamp's pleasant light. I got back in touch with old pals, the ones I had overlooked in the midst of my family's turmoil. Sincere friendships and critical dialogue, random outbursts of laughing, they resembled prescription drugs, bringing me back to life. Sitting at my favorite small cafe one spring day, I came to the realization that I no longer felt the desire to return. Put an end to your desire for acceptance. Don't wait for an apology or a hug to make amends. I was at ease with myself now. Even though my family still made an effort to connect with me, on occasion, I didn't feel dragged back into the usual cycle of responsibility and guilt this time. Since I knew I had permanently left that darkness, I was able to grin at their attempts with composure. I made my own life decision, a life that was complete, unrestricted, and brimming with love. First love for myself. My experience serves as a potent reminder that each person has the right to live their own life, not to cast a shadow on others. I at last felt truly free and happy when I had the guts to let go of things that weren't mine. Life was now about establishing my own worth and aspirations rather than making quiet sacrifices. To discover the light sometimes, leaving even the most familiar places behind requires courage, and I succeeded. How do you feel about Grace's path? Was it appropriate for her to leave and take back her identity? Leave a comment with your ideas. For more touching and motivational family tales, remember to subscribe to the channel.